Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to our first Book Sandwiched In presentation for 2020. I'm Barbara Cook, co-chair with Bev Stevens of the Book Sandwiched In series. Bev is in the back row watching us. We are very pleased today to be meeting here again at the Congregational Church. This lovely room seems to be especially well suited to our program. There are snacks, coffee, tea, cocoa over on the table and counter at the side of the room. Please help yourselves if you haven't already. Also on that table, which you may not have seen because it just arrived a little while ago, is a sign-up sheet where you can indicate an interest in being on the Book Sandwiched In committee. We meet several times in late summer and fall to determine books and reviewers for the upcoming year. In late spring and summer, the committee shares via email the names of books of possible interest so that we can read ahead before meeting in person. Meetings do occur during the daytime. Memberships in the Friends of the Library are also available at the Friends table at the back of the room with Brad. Our speaker today is Judith Rowe. She will review Becoming by Michelle Obama. A longtime resident of the Big Flats Horseheads area, Judy has 2 BS degrees in Civil and Industrial Engineering from the University of Tennessee and a master's in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell. She is currently self-employed as a consultant after retiring with 27 years at Corning Incorporated and working with several other major corporations. Judy enjoys doing creative things, including cooking and baking, as well as bargain shopping. She also likes reading non-fiction books that are inspirational, which makes her an excellent choice to review today's book, Becoming. Welcome, Judy, as our first presenter of 2020. Happy New Year. Yes. So I want to thank Barb for the opportunity to review this book, and it's so amazing to me because it almost felt like it was, and here we are in the church, it felt just divine. And I'm going to tell you why that was true. And I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, and then I really would love to talk to you about it rather than me just spewing off what I think. I'll tell you a little bit about what I think, and then I'd love to open it up to questions or comments or reflections. So first and foremost, how many of you read the book? Yes. You're reading it now? Awesome. Oh, you brought everything. That's awesome. So I'm a very informal person, too, as you can probably already tell. And so I really would appreciate the dialogue. But let me give you a little bit of background as to how it came to this book. So there's only 2 times in my life that my parents, who are still living there in Aberdeen, Maryland, buy books for their kids. I know, right? So the first one was when I was working at Corning, and I was going through a particularly tough time of figuring out what the heck am I going to do. You know, I'd gone back and gotten a degree, et cetera, et cetera. So my mother purchased Strength Finders book for me, and I love Strength Finders. If you would ask me to come back to talk about that, I'd love to. Standout Advantage is another one of my favorites, my all-time favorites. But she bought it. She goes, young lady, you need to discover your strengths. And I said, okay. So I totally embraced the book, and I loved it, and I talked about it. Anybody that knows me at Corning, if you talk to me about strengths for 5 minutes, I'll talk about Standout or Strength Finder. So then fast forward, this was when my kids were really small, so my husband and I live in Big Flats. Our sons are now 27 and 25. And so in Christmas 2018, by the way, little sidebar about my family, I'm one of 3 females, there's 4 of us. My brother is the youngest, I have 2 older sisters, so I'm the baby girl. And my dad was in the military for more than 20 years. So we traveled a lot, you know, we saw the world, et cetera, and then he retired, so they're now in Aberdeen. And my dad now he's held his failing, he's got COPD. So he's self-proclaimed housebound. He has a portable oxygen tank that he doesn't think is going to last longer than 30 minutes. So he can't leave the house longer than that. And so he's one of these guys, he's total military, tough, you know, strong, and he is somebody who's not warm and fuzzy. He's like, you work because they pay you, not because you like it. Yeah. And then finally retired, you know, he got in touch with his feminine side somehow. You know, I'm like, who are you? What have you done with my dad? I am going somewhere with this, believe it or not. So he starts watching Oprah and stuff like that. And then he's watching Dr. Phil, and he's like, well, what does it give you when you do that? So anywho, so fast forward, we have, you know, the election of Barack Obama, which I'll be honest with you, I never thought in my lifetime I would see an African-American black president of this United States of ours. I thought it would happen after I was well gone. And so my dad saw, he was watching Good Morning America, saw, I believe Michelle was either on the program or they were talking about her book coming out. And he is somebody that does zero Christmas shopping. My mom does all the Christmas shopping. So he said to my mom, he said, you need to go out and get this book for Judy. My mom's like, what? Are you kidding me? He says, yeah, I want her to have Michelle Obama's book, The Coming. And so I said, you know, I put it up in Christmas time. I'm like, this is, did I read it right? It's from Dad? You know? And my mom said, yes, he demanded. He, like, stayed after me until I went out and got this book. So I said, oh, okay, great. So I have the hard copy. I am an auditory learner, so I downloaded it immediately from Audibles, which I love. So I read it, but I actually had the hard copy book, which I love too. So then, fast forward, I liked the book. I really, really did. And I read it through, or listened to it through, and then read some excerpts. So then Barb sends me this email out of the blue saying, we want you to be our first, you know, speaker at our Sandwiched In series, and we want you to talk about becoming by, you know, Michelle Obama. I'm like, right? So then my dad, I was like, wow, and I told my dad, I said, Dad, guess what? I said, the library, they have this program, and they want me to be the speaker, and he's like, yeah, okay. So I'm like, okay, Dad. I'm really excited. He's like, yeah, that's good. So then I was talking to him, and I said, okay, what am I going to talk about? And I was talking to my husband about it, and I was thinking about the book, reflecting on the book. And then I said, you know, yesterday was his 86th birthday. So I called him, right? So I wished him happy birthday. And I said, Dad, I called him back later, because he hurried up, and I don't want to talk on the phone. I can't breathe. That's his excuse, because I know he can breathe. He's like, honey, the phone's for you. You got breath for that, but you can't talk to me for 5 minutes. But anyway, so I talked to him earlier today. My husband called back. I said, great, I can ask him a question. So I said, Dad, why did you buy this book for me? Why did you want me to have it? Of all the 3 daughters you asked my mom to buy it for me. He says, I don't know what I was thinking about. I said, yeah, you do, Dad. So I said, what did you think about? So he said, well, he said, this is history. This is history. And he said, I wanted you to have it. He said, because I thought that it would be helpful to you to understand her perspective of being the first black first lady in the White House to Barack's presidency. He said, and I do believe, he said, I think every black woman should read her book to understand and hear her perspective. So I said, oh, okay. I said, I'm going to share that tomorrow. He said, whatever you want to do. Okay, so I'm sharing it. Thank you, my dad, Joseph Perry Williams Sr., if you want to know who he is. And so, I'm delighted to come and talk to you about it. I read it a little while ago, so I had to go back and I asked, we just got Alexa, give me a summary of the book. No, I'm just kidding. So I did read it. But where I thought I would start first is to talk about, where I thought the most powerful pieces of the book came was at the beginning, the folder, if you read that. And so I'm going to read a piece of it, then I'm going to stop, and I'd love to have a discussion with you. I'll tell you what I thought, and then I'd like to open it up to anybody who wants to share their perspective. And it can be different than mine. I would prefer it to be different than mine. It makes for a livelier conversation. And then toward the end, Barb, if you would be so kind as to give me like a 5-minute warning of, your time's coming out, Judy, because I'll keep going. Then I'll read the excerpt that I wanted to leave you with before we end our time together. Does that sound fair? Awesome. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to do my best audio voice. Preface. When I was a kid, my aspirations were simple. I wanted a dog. I wanted a house that had stairs in it, 2 floors for 1 family. I wanted, for some reason, a 4-door station wagon instead of the 2-door Buick that was my father's pride and joy. I used to tell people that when I grew up, I was going to be a pediatrician. Why? Because I loved being around little kids, and I quickly learned that it was a pleasing answer for adults to hear. She's so right. And so because I love being around little kids, and I quickly learned that it was a pleasing answer for adults to hear, oh, a doctor, what a good choice. In those days, I wore pigtails and bossed my older brother around, managed always, and no matter what, as I would, I got A's in school. I was ambitious, though I didn't really know exactly what I was shooting for. Now I think it's one of the most useless questions an adult can ask a child. What do you want to be when you grow up? As if growing up is finite. As if at some point you become something and that's the end. So far in my life, I've been a lawyer, I've been a vice president at a hospital, and the director of a nonprofit that helps young people build meaningful careers. I've been a working class Black student at a very fancy, mostly white college. I've been the only woman, the only African American in all sorts of rooms. I've been a bride, a stressed out new mother, a daughter, torn up by grief. And until recently, I was the First Lady of the United States of America, a job that's not officially a job, but that nonetheless has given me a platform like nothing else I could have ever imagined. It challenged me, it humbled me, it lifted me up, and shrank me down. And sometimes all those things at one time. I'm just beginning to process what really took place over those last years. From the moment in 2006 when my husband first started talking about running for president, to the cold morning this winter when I climbed into a limo with Melania Trump, accompanying her to her husband's inauguration. It's been quite a ride. When you're First Lady, America shows itself to you in its extremes. I've been to fundraisers in private homes that look more like art museums, houses where people own bathtubs made of gemstones. I've visited families who lost everything in Hurricane Katrina and were tearful and grateful just to have a working refrigerator and stove. I've encountered people I find to be shallow and hypocritical, and others, teachers and military spouses, and so many more, whose spirits were so deep and so strong it's astonishing. And I've met kids, lots of them, all over the world, who crack me up and fill me with hope, and who blessedly manage to forget about my title once we start rooting around in the dirt in the garden. Since stepping reluctantly into public life, I've been held up as the most powerful woman in the world and taken down as an angry Black woman. I wanted to ask my detractors which part of that phrase meant the most to them. Is it angry? Or Black? Or woman? I smiled for photos with people who called my husband horrible names on national television, but still want a framed keepsake for their mantle. I've heard about the swampy part of the internet that questions everything about me, from down to whether I'm a woman or a man. A sitting U.S. congressman has made fun of my butt. I've been hurt, I've been furious, but mostly I've tried to laugh it all off. There's still a lot I don't know about America, about life, about what the future might bring, but I do know myself. My father, Fraser, taught me to work hard, laugh often, and keep my word. My mother, Marion, showed me how to think for myself and to use my voice. Together in our cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago, they helped me to see the value in our story, in my story, in the larger story of our country. Even when it's not pretty or perfect, even when it's more real than you want it to be, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. So that starts her book, and I'll read the rest of it when we come back. So what did I think about the book? I loved the book. First of all, I loved it just because my dad gave it to me, and it was such a big deal. It means a lot to me. I loved it because it chronicles a piece of history that I will never forget. And it really is very different and starking compared to what my parents talked about, how they were brought up in the civil rights era. I loved it because it gave me an insight to what her life was like as the First Lady. It also talked to me about things I could relate to, which is making choices as a working woman, wanting to have something and carving out things for yourself, and having to yield sometimes and do things differently that you never thought you would or could do in life. So I thought it was a very strong story, one that I'll never forget. I'll treasure having this book for a lot of different reasons. Where I felt it could have gone deeper, I would have liked to have known more about really her philosophies on families moving forward, to leave everyone with an opportunity to understand how powerful a unit has, whatever you call family, how important that is to help people become the best that they can be. So that's my opinion. What's yours? And by the way, so I'll start there, but I can also start by asking you a question. And I was talking to my husband about this yesterday. He says, why don't you ask them a couple of questions? So I'll come back to those later. First of all, what did you think of the book? Anyone? Yes, please.
So well written.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you have famous people, they have ghostwriters, where it's really stilted, and you can just see that's not their, strength.
Sure.
But I thought she was really a very, very good writer.
She is. And honestly, listening to the audiobook, she read it. She read the entire book herself, which is very cool. So if you have an opportunity to listen to the audio.
It's like she's sitting in the room and telling you the story. It's narration.
Exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. It's like, more tea? Would you like some more tea? I have some more tea too. Just getting done talking to her. Thank you so much. Yes, please.
From the part I haven't read the book, my wife has.
Oh.
From the part you read, I'm hearing her as a very practical thinker.
Very much so.
Because you mentioned outside of Chicago.
Yes.
And you mentioned civil rights era.
Yes.
And one thing she didn't mention was, I would say for black women in that era, a fur coat was very important.
Oh, well.
And
there's something
there is
really
no fur coat,
Yeah.
there is no fur coat there, because that's where you went out. You may not have been allowed to have this big a house or that big a house, or, but you could show you were something to the world by wearing a fur coat.
Oh, interesting.
And she never mentioned that. That's the reason I got the idea she was very practical.
Yeah, I think she was practical in terms of fluency. I think she talked about her first car. Do you remember what that was? Anyone? It's a Saab, I think. Was it a Saab? Yeah, she talked about getting a Saab. So that was her rites to passage because she came from humble beginnings. So one of the very first things she bought, I mean, not necessarily a fur coat. I think that for some in that era, that back in the day, that might have been important to have, like it was for a lot of effort.
A great example of that is Aretha Franklin. She had
and just
how many?
Yeah, as did Liza Minnelli and many others that were affluent. Yeah, absolutely. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes.
I think her family, as I recall, she just really relished being raised with her grandparents and in that humble place.
Sure.
She didn't see it as poverty.
No.
And they valued more than anything education.
Yes.
That was what they valued.
Yes.
And it still amazes me that they went from that humble beginnings, and the father is basically a blue-collar worker.
He was a blue-collar worker. He worked in a plant.
Still, they went to the best colleges.
They did. That was
So
always.
that part to me was that was her ticket.
Yes.
And how they did that still amazes me.
It is. It was very important. I think they both, mom worked for the government, doing, I think, secretarial work, and the dad worked for a water treatment plant, I believe that's what it was. And so it reminds me, and I didn't share this with you, but her story reminds me a lot of my story even, because my parents also, had humble beginnings, and I can relate to the fact that education was always, my parents said, it was like, you come out of the womb and they just stamp you college bound. It's just going to happen. No matter what, it's going to happen. So it was never a question in my parents' mind, ever, that she would do anything less than go to college. And because my mother always had the perspective, similar to what Michelle's mother talked about having a voice, my mother's motto to us was, anybody can take anything away from you, but they can never take away what you know in your head. They can burn your degree, but they can never take that knowledge from you. So that was something that was very powerful to me, and it did speak to me as well. Thank you. Excellent comment. Yes, please, and then I see you here. Yes?
So, it's a very minor thing, but speaking of education, what stayed with me for a long, long time was the guidance counselor who told her, basically told her she wasn't good enough.
Absolutely.
So that was number one. And number two, how gracious she was in saying she can't remember who that was. I remember that guidance counselor.
I know, I would have had that person's name etched on something, right? Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's a very good analogy and memory, that connecting those two pieces together. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Yes, Susan. Yes, and then I see you. Susan?
So you were talking about education, and there was a lot in that book, and I too had listened to it, audiobook. So the First Lady of the United States is sitting in my car with me.
Yeah.
You know, this for hours. And as her husband did, because he read his book,
yes,
his second book,
yes.
at least, and he was in my car with me also.
Oh my gosh.
But I didn't know that she kind of ended up at Princeton because her brother was there.
I know, right? You thought it was just like,
I knew she was bright,
Yes.
right? And I knew all of that.
Mhm.
And it was refreshing because early in, I think, when he was running for the first term, there was a lot of scuttlebutt that came out from her roommate at Princeton, and it
Yes.
wasn't pretty.
No.
And so this was a refreshing look into her life from a different perspective.
Yes.
And it made me realize that, maybe that other person really didn't like having a strong woman of color
Yes.
as a roommate.
That's exactly it. And to know less, her parents were kind of like really the fuel behind that. She had a roommate who abruptly moved out. Her parents no longer wanted her to live with somebody that was black. So they made arrangements with the university to pull her out and separate themselves. So thank you, Susan. That was a great memory from the book. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I liked a lot about this book is that she doesn't just tell the history of her life and the experiences that she shared with Barack and others,
Right.
but she gives you some sense of what her feelings are as she's trying to explain it. She's coming to new understandings as she goes,
Yes.
and it therefore gives a dimension to her story that you don't get in a lot of biographies.
No, that's true.
As James Baldwin wrote, history is not just the facts that we have about the past. History is present
There
in
you
our
go.
lives today.
Indeed.
And it made me really realize that our knowledge about things is constantly changing.
Yes.
And so therefore, our understanding is always subject to all kinds of influences around us, and she demonstrates that very well.
She does.
Her book is more about process
It is.
than it is, say, judging people
Yes.
or telling a story
No.
alone. It makes it meaningful.
Oh, yes, absolutely, great insight. And so, absolutely, the word becoming means that there's no end. You could say become, and that would be book, right? But she's saying becoming because it's constantly, as you say, it's changing all around us. So remaining present and really feeling what's happening today, also reflection, which is what she does a little bit of both, matters tremendously for her story. And all of our stories, actually. Thank you. Yes. Yes, I see you, and then you.
The thing that I got, besides all the other things that people have mentioned, the thing that I guess tickled me, and she talks about her husband was not very neat. And threw his socks all over the place and everything. And, she got criticized for that, which I thought was really stupid of other people. But I'm going, my goodness, her husband is just like mine.
I thought that was pretty cool too. It's like this familiarity and sameness, right, that is relatable. So absolutely, I saw that too. Excellent, thank you. Yes, Martha?
Picking up on that, the last two comments.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the relatability and just the humanness
Yes.
of herself and her family members.
Mhm.
And we may put them on pedestals and think of them in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But she certainly talks about mistakes she's made.
Oh, yes.
Or choices she's made
Mhm.
that we've all made when we're teenagers.
Oh,
or
my
parents,
gosh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was endearing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the point you were making about sort of the process and whatever, I really liked, and I can't remember now, because again, it's been a while since I read it, but becoming me, becoming we, and I think there's a third
Yes.
one too, and I may have the last one mixed up, but that sort of, not only in sort of our evolution as human beings, that we start out very small,
Mm-hmm.
and that our viewpoint becomes wider as we grow older.
Yes.
But I think it works on a lot of different
Oh
levels.
my goodness, yes. Yeah, on a personal level, professional level, and certainly relationship level, with you're talking about Barack is for sure. So yeah, absolutely, excellent point. Thank you. Yes, can we get him first, and then we'll come back to you. Yes.
The gentleman, where I mentioned one thing,
Yes.
or not being judgmental.
Mm. Okay, he
Being
said.
judgmental requires a degree of arrogance,
Oh.
and from remembering her, she never was arrogant. Like you say, she seemed to me as a very down-to-earth
Sure.
person.
Mm-hmm.
And the more arrogant you are, sometimes the more judgmental you are,
It can be, absolutely.
and never saw that in her.
Yeah, in the book, that didn't come through. It came through more of her acknowledgement that she's human like everyone else, right? And mistakes were made, and et cetera. So absolutely, I could see that one. Excellent point. Thank you. Yes, sir. Hi. You forgot. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, we should have index cards to write it down. Am I going this side? Yes, please.
That's okay. So one of the most interesting parts, I think, to me, because I was among that large cadre of people who thought, oh, well, Barack is done with his political career, but hey, is her explaining the fact that she doesn't have a political bone in her body.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and it just her not being interested in anything in terms of a political career, and yet she was willing, because she cared about him and his vision so much, to go ahead
Sure.
and help make that happen.
Indeed. Thank you so much for a nice segue, because what I'd like to talk about next is, if anyone doesn't have a comment about the overall book, I have a question for you. Thank you for that insight. Because my question to you, when I was talking to my husband about the book, he said, I want to know if anybody really understands, after reading the book, just what she might have been had she not met Barack. What do you think? Yeah.
I think your comment kind of made me think that, because sometimes I was frustrated with her for not getting more involved in
Okay.
presidential things.
Okay.
And maybe some of the events that the president went to, whatever, she seemed really focused to me
Mm-hmm.
on the Chicago suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And where she was raised, she
Mhm.
really had a focus for raising that up.
Okay.
So I think maybe, well, she was an attorney, correct?
She was an attorney.
So maybe she would have done something along those lines, I don't know.
She was healthcare.
She was
healthcare,
yeah,
right,
she was
when
both
she-
actually. So
Right,
she
no,
did, yeah, so she had a little bit of both, and she had a lot going on, to be honest with you, so she's like a lot of us. And then becoming a word, again, comes back into her evolution of her own career, because she didn't just stick with she didn't become a pediatrician after all, right? But she certainly didn't stop with being a lawyer. She went into health, she was nonprofit, healthcare, a lot of different things she tried, so absolutely. So it could have been that she could have been something
In
the,
Chicago.
building that area up like she was wanting to, yes. So I see you and then her, okay, thank you. And And by the way, I'm not ignoring you, so you have to go, hey!
I just wanted to say, I have no doubt she would be very successful, probably a CEO or something, but we never would have known her because we don't know who's the CEO of Coca-Cola or whatever.
Right,
You know,
that's
they're
true.
not in the public eye as much as she is. So I'm
That's
glad
true.
that she met both.
And I am as well, thank you very much, absolutely, thank you, good point, thank you. Yes, sir.
One interesting point that you made, that she makes in the book, is that the question that is asked often of children, what do you want to be when you grow up? She pretty much pushes it aside and doesn't focus on the thing that you want to become, but she really does talk about how she changes, how she learns.
Yes.
And it makes me remember a comment my grandmother used to make, and I'm not sure the context of it.
Okay.
But she used to say to people, don't ask me how I am because I'm not.
Oh,
And that was a way of
That's
affirming
interesting.
that she was independent of whatever expectations I think
oh,
maybe
interesting.
people might have pushed at her.
Sure.
And I always remember that because it was, to me, a sign that she was opinionated.
Sure, she had something going on there, right? Probably back in the day when women were certainly not asked to express, right, with who they were. She stood tall and said, this is not who I am, you know, don't ask me. So that's very poignant. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Other comments or questions about this part of it? Who she would be without the rock? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to get you and then I'll get you, okay? Yes, please.
She's a young woman yet.
Yes.
All right, she's written a book,
Yes.
but I just think there's so much more that, and I don't know what she's doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm wondering if the level of affluence that they've attained
Mm-hmm.
is going to be, maybe there won't be such an urge to do something.
I don't know. I don't get that sense. What do you all think? Thank you so much for that great question. So first, anyone answer, then I'll get your question or comment. What do you think? Because they've made it, they've got, you know, they're not gonna want for anything for the rest of their lives, right? Do you think she's gonna stop?
No.
No.
Matter of fact, I think they've opened a foundation. I don't exactly know what it's for, but I know they've got one or two particular foundations and interests that they're pursuing as a couple, and they're doing a lot of different things. So I'll get you started for starters. Yes?
I could have played with her Barbie dolls.
Aw.
I could have also dug in her garden, as I do in mine.
Oh, nice.
And I have such respect for her, I'd like to see a real person in the White House.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
But when you talk about the level of affluence, those are material things.
They are.
They're not her values,
No.
her integrity.
No.
Now, what does the book tell you about her values and her integrity?
I'll throw that out to everyone else, and then I'll tell you what I think. That's a great question. What do you think her values were? Or are, I should say. And are they evolving? Or are they pretty steady throughout the whole book? Steady. What do you see then? Yes, please.
I would say a big part of her life is family.
Yes. Yes. Right? And in fact, I was talking to someone about the book just before I came here, actually, which we were finishing one meeting, and then we started talking about the book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta go! So anyways, she was saying the same thing. She said she wished she had actually left with more of a, for lack of a better word, but a call to action for people to really get back in touch and be more family-centered. So to your point, I think that absolutely throughout the book was one of her values, even before she became a mom, right? Thank you. Others? What do you think?
So Judy, I think she
Yeah.
was very open and engaging,
Yes,
trying to get everybody else's point of view.
absolutely. Yeah, that's good. So she was somebody that was open to hearing the thoughts and opinions of others. Okay, great. Thank you. Others? Yes, please.
Well, I read her first book, but I did not read this one.
Okay.
But do you think she will help with her children's child care, like her mother?
That's a good question. I don't know why, but I think yes. And the reason why I say that, me personally, because you could see how she was very kid-centered in the White House. She would dip around the dirt with the kids. I can't imagine that she wouldn't do that with her own grandkids. What do you think?
No, that's what I think. But you know, say you're gonna go out maybe 10 years or so before
Sure.
that happens.
Mhm.
So it would be interesting to see.
It is gonna be interesting, even to see what she's become in 10 years, because she said she's still evolving, right? Yes, please, did you have a question or comment before? Yes, go ahead.
So digging around in the dirt, I read, because I saw at the library, it's a picture book about her garden, the garden at the White House.
I didn't know that.
And it's very interesting. I would highly recommend that you get it. It's quick because it's full of pictures.
Oh, nice.
And it's amazing. It is not easy to build a vegetable and fruit garden at the White House because it's a national park.
Ah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember the book, how she talked about how she had to fight for that space?
Yeah, yeah.
Fight and fight and fight.
So I would recommend, if you like this one, get that and our library.
Thank you. A plug for the library. Awesome. Thank you. Other comments, because I have one more question for you. Yes, please.
I also think she's the type of person that, somebody mentioned, I think my husband mentioned, that she is not arrogant. She's the type of person that you could call Michelle.
There you go. Yeah.
And not feel like you were being disrespectful
Mhm.
to her.
Mhm.
She just had that spirit about her that just brought people in.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Kitchen table camaraderie.
Indeed. I love it. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, Laura.
A couple of sort of scenes that stuck out for me, I guess, because I'm very visual, and so two things that stuck out for me was, I think it was in the beginning when it was present day before she started, or I don't know, whichever, but it was present day in the house that they're living in now. And I think she said that Barack was out of town and that she was just making cheese on toast or something like that.
That's the passage that I'm going to read next
Love
at the
that.
end. So don't tell me that. No, it's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And then the other one was her and one of the daughters sneaking out of the White House.
That was a big deal.
That was huge.
I mean, seriously, did you see as
And they
many?
couldn't even open a window.
Exactly, or open the curtains
Yeah.
for sun, you know? And then they had the dogs, and it's like, so they really had to plan quite extravagantly. I think there was one time she mentioned just putting her coat on and just like leaving, and they're like, you know, Secret Service is like, oh my gosh, she's on the roofs, you know? Like they were radioing each other and stuff like that. She said she realized, and I think she had a different response. What I liked was what she talked about. She talked about wanting the freedom of being able to do whatever she wanted to do when she wanted to do it. And that's the passage I'm going to read as the closing of this. But then she also talked about feeling bad and guilty about how much effort and time and money it took for her to go outside to go shopping at the market. You know, she talked about having to plan ahead and just how much sheer money and energy it was costing the American people to do the simple things that she wanted to do, and having mixed feelings about that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, please.
Now, does she still have bodyguards?
For the rest of her life.
For the rest of her life,
Yes.
so she doesn't have total privacy.
No. But more than she did before, and that's the passage I'm going to read. As a matter of fact, I'll just read it. How's that? And then I'll leave you with another question. How's that? Here we go. Any other questions before I start with reading the passage? For 8 years, I lived in the White House, a place with more stairs than I can count, plus elevators, a bowling alley, and an in-house florist. I slept in a bed that was made up with Italian linens. Our meals were cooked by a team of world-class chefs and delivered by professionals more highly trained than those at any five-star restaurant or hotel. Secret Service agents, with their earpieces and guns and deliberately flat expressions, stood outside our doors, doing their best to stay out of our family's private life. We got used to it, eventually. Sort of. I know, right? The strange grandeur of our new home, and also the constant quiet presence of others. The White House is where our two girls play ball in the hallways and climb the trees on the south lawn. It's where Barack sat up late at night, where Sunny, one of our dogs, sometimes pooped on the rug. It's also, I could stand on the Truman balcony and watch the tourists posing with their selfie sticks and peering through the iron fence, trying to guess at what was going on inside. There were days I felt totally suffocated by the fact that our windows had to be kept shut for security, that I couldn't get some fresh air without causing a fuss. There were other times I'd be awestruck by the white magnolias blooming outside, the everyday bustle of government business, and the majesty of political and military welcome. There were days, weeks, and months when I hated politics. And there were moments when the beauty of this country and its people so overwhelmed me that I almost couldn't speak. Then it was over. Even if you could see it coming, even your final weeks are filled when they are filled with good emotional goodbyes, the day itself is still a blur. A hand goes on a Bible, an oath gets repeated, one president's furniture gets carried out while the others comes in. Closets are emptied and refilled in the span of a few hours. Just like that, there are new heads on new pillows, new temperaments, new dreams, and when it ends, you walk out the door that last time from the world's most famous address. You're left in so many ways to find yourself again. So let me start here with a small thing that happened not long ago. I was at home in the red brick house that my family recently moved into. Our new house sits about 2 miles from our old house on a quiet neighborhood street. We're still settling in. In the family room, our furniture is arranged in the same way it was in the White House. We've got mementos around the house that remind us that it was real. Photos of our family, time at Camp David, handmade pots given to us by some Native American students, a book signed by Nelson Mandela. What was strange about this night was that everyone was gone. Barack was traveling, Sasha was out with her friends, Emily's been living and working in New York, finishing up her gap year before college. It was just me, our 2 dogs, and a silent, empty house like I've never known in 8 years. And I was hungry. I walked downstairs, the stairs from our bedroom, with the dogs following at my heels. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge. I found a loaf of bread, took out 2 pieces, and laid them in the toaster oven. I opened a cabinet and I got out a plate. I know it's a weird thing to say, but to take a plate from the shelf in the kitchen without anyone insisting that they can do it for me is a big deal. This feels as close to my old life as I've come. Or maybe it's my new life just beginning to announce itself. In the end, I didn't just make toast. I made cheese toast, moving my slices of bread into the microwave and melting a fat mess of gooey cheddar cheese between them. I carried my plate outside to the backyard. I didn't have anyone I was going to tell anybody where I was going, and I just went. I was in bare feet, wearing a pair of shorts, and the chill of the winter had finally lifted. The crocuses were about to starting to push up through the beds along our back wall. The air smelled like spring. I sat on the steps of our veranda, feeling the warmth of the day's sun still caught in the slate between my feet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and my own dogs paused to listen, seemingly momentarily confused. It occurred to me that it was a jarring sound for them because they had no neighbors, and they had no neighbors with dogs. So for them, this was all new. As the dogs looked off to explore the perimeter around the yard, I ate my toast in the dark, feeling alone in the best possible way. My mind wasn't on the group of guards with guns sitting less than 100 feet away or yards away at custom-built command posts inside a garage, or the fact that I still can't walk down the street without security detail. I wasn't thinking about the new president, or for that matter, the old president either. I was thinking instead about how in a few minutes I could go back inside my house, wash my plate in the sink, head up to bed, maybe opening a window so I could feel the spring air. How glorious that would be. I was thinking too that in the stillness, this was affording me a real opportunity to reflect. As First Lady, I'd get to the end of a busy week and need to be reminded of how it had started. By the time, but time is beginning to feel different. My girls who arrived at the White House with their Polly Pockets, a blanket named Blanky, and a stuffed tiger named Tiger, we are now looking at teenagers, young women, with plans and voices of their own. My husband is making his own adjustments to life after the White House, catching his own breath. And here I am in this new place with a lot to say. Yes. Oh,
You have another 3 minutes. if you
oh,
want.
3 minutes. Yes, sir.
I will never be able to remember.
Yes.
15. It's at least 45.
Thank you all for coming. Yes. Yeah, so it talks a lot about her mother. Does anyone remember having reflections about her relationship with her mother? Extremely close. Extremely, it's like I view her as her rock the entire time she was in the White House. I really do. I don't know if anybody else would say that same thing. She was always a rock growing up, the one that kept strength and voice inside of her that helped her stay on trajectory for what she wanted to do. And she was always the one she would go to reflect and question what she was doing next step. Others? Yes.
But I also got a sense that her mom had, when she lived in the White House with them, her own sense of independence and her own life, which I thought was really kind of refreshing.
Yeah, she got to go to the market, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, she did, and she was the one that cared, watched over their daughters when she was there, so she never worried when she and Brock had to go. So very, very strong relationship, and especially after the heartbreak of her father passing. So her father passed, right? I don't think he got to see Brock in office, for sure. So that led her mother to quit her job and move to the White House to help care for the kids and to care for, I really think to care for Michelle also. Yeah, nice question, thank you. Any other remaining comments or questions that you have? Yes, please.
Respect for her father was
Oh my gosh.
remarkable. I mean, it was just so
Strong.
stated.
Oh, yeah.
How much she respected how
Oh,
hard
yes.
he worked and who he was.
Yes, there's that love and respect that is unending. Yes, ma'am.
What struck me about Michelle and Barack too was the grace that they had.
Oh my gosh.
It was just unbelievable to me.
Yes.
And they were cool. They were a really cool couple, and I think they changed the face
They did.
of the whole thing big time.
Yes.
And the other thing that has stuck with me, and it's become my motto, because it wasn't my motto before, when they go low, you go high.
Yes, ma'am.
So that is my motto now. So when that happens with me, okay, I'm gonna go high.
There
I'm
you
not
go.
gonna forget, no.
As a matter of fact, I think, thank you so much for that. Does anybody have any comments? Because I think that's the best way to end this, is for us to recite together, when they go low,
Yeah.
we go high. Let's do it, 1, 2, 3. When they go low, we go high. Remember that. Happy New Year. Thank you for being with me this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Judy, for a great presentation. Such enthusiasm, and I think this forum where all of us were able to participate as much as we wished was really a great way to go for this book. It had so many different things in it that appeal to different people in different ways, and I think a lot of that was brought out today. Thank you very much, Judy, for what you have done for us.
Thank you for inviting me to come.
Thank you so much. Before we leave today, I know that John Brown wanted me to make an announcement about an event on February 15th at the East Corning Fire Department costing $30, and I believe it's in support of the library book sale. Does anybody know anything about it?
It's probably for their expenses, but because we have our book sales there, we just thought it'd be nice to support them.
Very good. And we can hear from him again next week, maybe if he can stay, then he can explain it better, since he got all the information to me, but I can't remember all that much detail. All right, next week, our presenter will be Pauline Emery. She will review The Library Book by Susan Orleans. Following the program, we will have the annual meeting of the Friends at approximately 1:15. It's immediately following the presentation, however long that takes, and then right away we'll have the annual meeting. And we hope that you'll all be able to stay for that annual meeting for all the information and the voting that is necessary there. And finally, before leaving, we ask your help in picking up the chairs and putting them into the rack over to the side. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. We'll be back again next week. Please come, same time.